Great. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today with our endorsed candidate, Judge Katie O'Malley, who is running for Attorney General for the state of Maryland. And I really appreciate your time, Judge O'Malley. These folks that are joining us today have been with us for lots of webinars during the General Assembly and through the summer, and are real conservation voters, folks that care about the environment, care about voting. So we thought it would be great for them to hear from you directly. And as always, I've got a series of questions I'm going to ask Judge O'Malley, and then we will be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions for her, we'll grab those at the end as well. So go ahead and put your questions in there. But for now, by the way, I'm Kim Coble. I'm the Executive Director for the Maryland League of Conservation Voters for Everyone. Let me introduce the Attorney General candidate, Judge Katie Curran O'Malley. Katie was born and raised in Baltimore and continues to live there. She's a product of the Maryland education system, including Towson University and the University of Baltimore Law School. She is a former assistant state's attorney, and for the last 20 years, she's been the Baltimore City District Court judge, or a Baltimore City District Court judge. From the bench, she has worked to resolve issues of domestic violence, drug addiction, and the mental health crisis affecting people in Maryland. She's been a tireless advocate for marriage equality and for equal rights for the LGBTQ community. Excuse me, my phone's ringing. And if she's to be elected, she'll be the first woman to serve as Maryland's top law enforcement officer. She's been endorsed by Maryland LCV, the Washington Post, and scores of others. So thank you for joining us, Judge O'Malley. I appreciate your time. So let me start out with a question I know you have gotten regularly, but I think it's one that everybody has, and that is, if you can tell us in general what the Attorney General does for Maryland, and also why you're interested in having that office.
Sure, thanks, Kim, and it's great to be here this afternoon with everyone from LCV. Thank you all for your endorsement of my campaign to be the next Attorney General. So it's a big job. It's probably, I think, one of the most interesting jobs an elected official can have, because there are so many areas that the Attorney General's office works on and with. So dealing with, of course, the environment, environmental protection issues, pollution, environmental crimes is one unit in the office. There's also consumer protection issues that sometimes intertwine with environmental issues, as we know. And then there are organized crime. There's the organized crime unit that deals with public safety and works with all different jurisdictions in our state in combating gang violence and gun violence. In so many ways. That office really does do a lot of work protecting Marylanders, but also, you know, as the chief legal officer for the state, the next Attorney General will be doing what the Attorney Generals have been doing for years, advising all the state agencies on what the law is and how they best serve Marylanders. So the next governor will create, I'm sure, a whole new group of people who will be coming in running the different state agencies. Our DNR, the Department of the Environment, the public safety, consumer protection areas, Department of Health, Department of Business Development. So you want to be able to advise and give these heads of these different state agencies the best legal advice possible. So there's not really one Attorney General that can ever have all the subject matter expertise in the many different areas that the Attorney General's office has. But one thing that I think has been present with all of the past Attorney Generals is that they've all been trial lawyers and have had significant experience working and advocating in courts for their clients, or for like Doug Gansler, he was the state's attorney. So for either in a public service way or in private service or private clients. And I think that's really, it's a really integral part of the job, is being able to advise all the lawyers that do go to the courts of Maryland, whether it's the district court, the circuit court, or the appellate courts, on best strategies when advocating for Marylanders and what's in Maryland's best interest.
Let me follow up a little bit on that, because your entire career has been in the legal system, and that juxtaposed to one of the other candidates that's running. And um, so knowing the systems, how it works, knowing the players, knowing the strategies and whatnot, can you talk to us a little bit more about why that is so critical for the state attorney general?
Well, I've been in Maryland's courtrooms now for 30 years, and I love being in the courtroom. I loved it as a law clerk. I loved it as a prosecutor, and I've just enjoyed being in courts every single day for the past 20 years as a judge. And it's that passion that you bring to advocacy that I think is so important when you're the chief law enforcement officer for the state, and making sure that the laws that are on the books are being enforced in all the different state agencies and in all the different areas and the unique areas that the Attorney General has influence over. Also, having the ability to advise agencies on how to stay out of court. I mean, we don't always want to go to court, but what these agencies need to do to comply with the law, and giving them the best advice, the best opinions, because they rely on that heavily, as well as the legislators rely heavily when they present legislation every year on the expertise of the Attorney General's office when it comes to the constitutionality of bills that they are submitting. And then also, going over all of the contracts that the state enters into. The AGs have to go through and make sure that all these contracts are definitely sound contracts, and that they are not, going against, the best interests of Marylanders, but always keeping in mind that the millions and millions of dollars that the state enters into on different procurement contracts are definitely being done without bias, and that there's fairness and equity, and that the contracts are sound. So it's a lawyer's job. You really have to be advising and working with lawyers who you want to keep out of court, but oftentimes we know we have to go to court to protect consumers, to protect the environment, to protect people from public safety issues.
Well said, and obviously very, very comprehensive. One of the things that you have stated, and I'll quote, is that you will fight tooth and nail to protect Marylanders' right to clean air, clean water, and clean land. So last week, we got some devastating news out of the Supreme Court and regarding environmental protection. I'm curious on how you'll use the power of the Attorney General's office in Maryland to protect Maryland's environment, natural resources, and what your top environmental priorities are.
I think Maryland could begin by creating in the AG's office an environmental justice unit or office, which has been done in, I believe, 4 other states, and the Department of Justice also has that, and making sure that all the agencies are using, or that we are advising them on with the lens of environmental justice. How with zoning laws, where are we putting different pollutants, and how we are controlling that, and making sure that they're not just happening in urban areas or in rural areas, making sure that we use the federal money to get rid of the lead pipes that we still have, the toxic lead pipes that are still existing. I think there's an estimate of about 75,000 of these pipes, and there's federal money that doesn't have any strings attached to it, or at least a good portion of the federal money that the states can use to remove these pipes, because they could be in our schools, they could be in our drinking water, and it's just a matter of time before we have a crisis like they had in Michigan and Pittsburgh. So coming up with that unit so that we can proactively look at ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and really look at the social costs of carbon. And the law that you guys helped pass this past session, the Climate Solutions Now Act, is fantastic. And so making sure that all aspects of that law are being enforced and being complied with, because we don't have a lot of time when it comes to climate change. We started the climate change laws in Maryland back in 2007 and in 2008, and the Hogan administration has really slow walked a lot of that legislation. So we need to, as the Attorney General, I need to work with all the state agencies to make sure we're all on the same page when it comes to moving forward to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to save our environment.
Yeah, I appreciate how comprehensive your look at the environment is. Not only is it air and water and pollution and equity and justice, it's also enforcement and state agency actions and citizen action. And so it's a very multidimensional look at it. And, with that backdrop, I've heard you also mention an interest in having an Attorney General's report card for the climate, as well as continuing with the environmental roundtable that Attorney General Frosch has started. So talk a little bit more about how you see internal systems supporting those goals.
So transparency and accountability in government all across the board is a must, and I understand that a lot of I've heard from different environmentalists who have complained that they can't get reports from the Department of the Environment without being charged hefty fees. And now they're even being charged lawyer review fees for these reports on, basic information that we should all have when it comes to clean air, clean water, and clean land. And so I think by making, to the best of our ability, these numbers transparent and accountable when it comes to what we're doing with the Bay and how we're reducing the TMDL loads, and if we're meeting where we want these standards to be, and having a report card and saying where we are. I mean, I know the Chesapeake Bay Foundation does do a report card, so in grades the state, and I think it's important that we in the state grade ourselves so that we are making sure we do everything we can when it comes to state agencies and looking at through a lens of in the environment and how what we're doing, whether it's through the Department of the Environment, through the Department of Planning, whatever we're doing in government, that it's not affecting and making climate change worse, but we're working to make it better, and keeping, on the website for the Attorney General where you can go to see the progress we're making.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's really important. And just a side note for all our listeners, tomorrow we'll be releasing our 2022 scorecard, which is a report card on the legislature and what they have done with the environmental bills that came forward. And we also make notes on whether those bills were signed by the governor or went into action without his signature. So a bit of accountability on the governor's part as well. Report cards are really critical. That's where the accountability comes in. So I really appreciate your perspective, the importance that they play, as well as transparency. One more kind of in the weeds question before we come back out again is, what's the AG's role in terms of enforcement and having the agencies actually enforce environmental laws? Because over the last, during the Hogan administration, there's been a real decline in that. So can you talk a little bit about how that office can support those efforts?
So the office, we have some very good laws on the books that I know, LCV has helped with those laws, and beginning with the O'Malley administration when it's coming to climate change, and it's really been some very proactive ways in dealing with climate change and environmental enforcement. So, pollution comes from so many different aspects, and having people in the Department of the Environment and Department of Natural Resources refer cases to the Attorney General's office is important, but also making sure that citizens know how to report environmental pollution and environmental crimes that are happening in their communities. Right now, the AG's office has one investigator hired for the entire state of Maryland to investigate complaints, whether they come from the state agency or from a citizen. And I just don't think that's enough, because we have so much going on. We know that there's a lot of issues with MES now and the Back River wastewater treatment. I think Patapsco is also having issues. So we have to get a handle on that, because it's having a dire effect on the Bay and all the rivers and waterways. So the AG there are laws on the books. They need to be enforced. We need to strengthen the environmental crimes unit. There should be more than one investigator. And I believe there's only about 3 attorneys. I've heard 1, but then I've heard someone else say there was 3. So I need to figure out if there's the attorneys need more help and more assistance. There might be another area in the AG's office that could lend a hand, because I've seen the cases come to court, so they do go to court and enforce the laws. But I just think that it's not. It could be staffed a little bit better so that we could have more cases and end the pollution when it comes to urban and rural areas.
Well said. Yeah, because many of us spend a lot of effort and time to get bills passed, get laws in place, and they're only as good as they are implemented. So I think that that's a really critical role for sure. So let me get out of the weeds of the legal aspects of this job and share with folks a little bit about what you're learning as you are going all over the state. I know you're talking to folks on the Eastern Shore and the Western Maryland and Central and Southern, and what are you hearing that people are concerned about and talking to you about?
So on the Eastern Shore, I know there's a lot of concern about this development that's been proposed in Trapp. So Trapp is in Easton, and it's just, right outside of Easton, and it's just 2,000, I think, homes, 2,500 homes that the developer who purchased this land 20 years ago now wants to enforce. And the problem with it is obvious. It's 2,500 homes, and there's been no comprehensive plan for traffic, for schools, for grocery stores. And you all know, if you've gone Route 50, how it gets backed up in the summer and spring and fall. But it's also, gets backed up now. It'll be even more backed up with 2,500 additional homes. So there is a court action that is taken place, and I want to follow up and see what's going on with that. But it hasn't caused the developers to stop cutting trees down, which, in and of itself is a problem, especially when we're talking about sea level rise and the shore. So that's something that I've been concerned about as well. And on the Eastern Shore, I believe it was Valley Proteins that was polluting the waters. They weren't complying with the laws on the books, and they were polluting, and it was to such an extent that homeowners could smell the sort of the stench that was coming from from the corporation. So that's something I've heard in the West, on the Eastern Shore. In Western Maryland, there's concerns about Deep Creek Lake and about boats not being regulated and bringing in, different, aspects to the waterways there that are dangerous for the natural species there. So invasive type of species that have come in. And so that's a big concern in Western Maryland. And of course, the Bay is all of our concern because it's such a huge part of our state. And the, 6 Bay states and DC all have to work comprehensively together in order to keep it clean. So we need to make sure that we have enforcement on the other states and what they're supposed to be doing to keep up with the Clean Water Act. So I'm hearing a lot about, people's complaints about environmental issues, big and small. In the city, there's a lot of dumping. There's lots of illegal dumping going on. And, I'll be driving down the street and I'll see somebody just throw trash out of their window. And so that, I think you're afraid in Baltimore, as you should be, to beep the horn and cause a ruckus because you never know if somebody has a handgun and that they're using it. So, So, there's big city issues and there's rural issues that all need to be addressed. And, what I keep bringing up too is the lead pipes and how, we really need to get a handle on that as quickly as possible, especially since there's money to pay for it.
Right. Yeah, just leaving money on the table is probably the greatest fault of all. So, one of the things that, as we've been looking at the election and doing work, it's nice to hear you affirm that you're hearing about environment, that it's an important aspect for people's voting decisions. So we have a number of folks on this call, and I think I want both of us to answer this question, but why should people vote for Judge Katie O'Malley for Attorney General? And let me start with that because we endorsed it, and then you follow up with why you think they should. But Maryland League of Conservation Voters endorses candidates, and we have a whole section of our organization that works in this realm. You can go to our website and you can see who we have endorsed. And we looked at all the candidates for Attorney General. They completed questionnaires, lengthy questionnaires. We conducted interviews. We had discussions. And in the end, it was a very easy selection for us because she is the most qualified candidate, bar none. When the skills that you want in an Attorney General are different than the skills you want as a governor. But Judge O'Malley is running to be the Attorney General and has more legal experience, more legal knowledge, more legal context, more legal perspective, more statewide perspective on these issues as well. And so when our board voted, it was a straightforward, easy vote that we would endorse Katie O'Malley. And I strongly encourage everyone to vote for her because of these qualifications. So Judge O'Malley, why do you think people should vote for you?
Well, Kim, thank you. And again, thank LCV for endorsing me. I think as you said, this is a different position from governor or from legislator. This is a position where you're not just promoting policy and good laws, you are doing that. That's an aspect. Working with the legislature is something I'll really enjoy doing, to promote good laws and to make sure that we are working together to advise on the constitutionality of bills and all of that important work. But it's about using the laws. So the Attorney General, like you said, you can have great laws on the books and you can create great laws and have good policies, but they have to be enforced and they have to be used. And we have seen in the area of our environment with this past administration a lack of interest or curiosity when it comes to enforcing the laws. And also his background, not to make this all about Hogan, but having a commercial real estate developer his perspective versus a perspective of let's conserve, let's restore, let's rebuild our environment. I don't think that's been a priority. I know it hasn't been a priority when it comes to the advising of the state agencies, because I've talked to Attorney General Frosch about that conflict and how difficult it has been, especially when talking about clean water for drinking. The Attorney General had to send a letter that to the governor saying, hey, we're going to have a real problem here. We need more inspectors. We don't have the state agencies staff to do the work to make sure our citizens are drinking safe water. I mean, that's an essential staff person. They go to the EPA, they get paid higher from attrition and then the pandemic. I mean, a lot of our state agencies are very understaffed, and that makes it very difficult to serve Marylanders. Back to me, why I should be the next Attorney General. Again, Kim, it's a lot of what you said. It's the legal experience from being and living in courtrooms for 30 years, knowing when to go to court and when not to. As a prosecutor, there were plenty of cases I didn't pursue because there were issues with the cases, whether it was lack of evidence or violations of people's constitutional rights, making decisions when to go to court and how you try a case in front of a judge versus a jury. Those are strategic decisions that you can't make them if you've never done it. And it's, again, not a criticism or a negative thing that I'm saying about my opponent. I'm just saying if you've never tried a single criminal case in the state of Maryland where you want to be the Attorney General, it's really not the job for you. And then I presided over thousands of civil cases as well. So I have that balanced background, and I think that's what would make me the better person to vote for. So I hope people will go to my website and look at what we're talking about when it comes to the environment, when it comes to criminal justice reforms, because we desperately need those still in our country and in our state, when it comes to consumer protection and when it comes to environmental justice. So these are all great things that I've put on the website, and people can go to the website and learn about both candidates that way.
Thank you for that. And for all the listeners, I can see in the chat that there's lots of websites and links that are being posted to get Judge O'Malley's climate plan, to look at who else Maryland LCV has endorsed, and also at the state level and in the Maryland General Assembly. So lots of tools in the chat. So in the last few minutes that we have, let me encourage all of you, and I'll have Judge O'Malley also chime in here. First of all, not only do you need to vote, which you do, but you need to get your neighbors and your friends and your family and their friends and families to vote. This is a primary election on a funny time of year, July 19th, right? Please go vote. There's early voting that started tomorrow.
Yeah.
I can remember what the day was, tomorrow. So if you need help finding your voting site or you have any questions about that, contact us, we can help. But Judge O'Malley, how can folks that are listening here today make sure that you get across the finish line here on at least in the primary and then in the general?
Well, thanks. Voting, as you said, is essential. Making sure that if you know friends that can't get to the polls, you take them to the polls or get them to a ballot box if they've got a mail-in ballot that they need to get out. Going and talking to friends. If you're convinced that I'm the candidate, talk to 5 friends who then might talk to 5 friends and talk to 5 friends and spread the word. We, raised a good deal of money, but I am being outspent. And today we found out that dark money is being put into an ad from out of state money, dark money. We don't know where it's coming from for an attack ad on me. But it's really not that bad of an attack ad, but it's a lot of money. I think it's like $400,000. So we're continuing to raise money in state here with our donors. So any kind of donation that you could give to the campaign will help us keep our ad, which I don't believe is negative. It's just contrast. Why is it that when women contrast, it's considered negative, but men do it all the time? But don't let me get on my high horse. So, because I will, it's really important. And what we've seen with the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, what they've done to the EPA, what they've done with guns, making it more easy to get a gun and more difficult for women and girls to make our own choices when it comes to our reproductive health care, has really gotten people upset and angered, as it should. And I was at a senior center yesterday and they said, what can we do about this? And we can just, we have to have our voices have to be heard, and we have to get people to vote, and we have to get more Democrats elected. We cannot let the midterms affect Congress. We must make sure that we still have a majority in the Congress. We need to vote and get more Democrats elected. And I think now more than ever in our state that's so progressive, we need to elect more women. I'm always hearing men talk about protecting women and protecting women's reproductive rights. We don't need to be protected. We just need to be elected. And that's what I tell people all across the state. We need more women in power. We need more women where decisions are being made in corporate boards, in legislatures, in higher offices like governor and AG and comptroller. So I am working really hard to keep my message, which is contrast, on TV. So anything that you can do to help would be fantastic.
Yeah, and let me emphasize that too. Please, if dig deep, and even if it's a small amount, make a donation. It's a money game, and it's all we need it. So I hope you have all are all walking away with as much as enthusiasm as I and our board and our organization has for Judge O'Malley. She is definitely the most qualified and most passionate about the job. So we need to elect her as Attorney General, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you on Friday when we have a conversation with our gubernatorial endorsed candidate, Wes Moore. But in the meantime, tell your friends, vote for Katie, make a donation, and thanks for all your great work. Thanks, Judge O'Malley. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.